You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. We've got a good topic today. I always say that. We've got a good topic today because it would be lame if I came on and I said, hey, people-centric leaders, we got nothing. We're just going to record 21 minutes of just meandering dialogue.
I mean, that's kind of what we do. You know, like we meander. Just it's on topic meandering.
I think we stay perfectly on topic. I think we're heavily scripted and everybody knows what's about to be said next.
None
I
of
think
this is
it's
true.
a little bit like a tango. It starts with meander and then it turns into this great thing. You know what I mean? It's great. We're about to do something awesome.
Well, welcome to the people-centric tango. We're going to help you take 2 steps forward and 2 steps backwards. That's what we're here for.
3 steps
Oh,
forward,
no.
2 steps back. That's it.
3 steps forward, 2 steps backward, so you can still progress moving forward. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. But today's topic, what we're going to talk about is grit, something that we hear a lot as we're traveling the country, working with different clients and different people. Again, I want to say that again. Sometimes people, I've heard people who listen to our podcast go like this, I love your podcast. Like, what do you guys do in real life? The reason that we have good material for you all is because most of our time is spent with real companies, real organizations, real managers, real executives, real employees who are struggling with real issues. So the stuff that we're bringing to you is hot and fresh. It's right out of the oven. It's stuff that came directly from clients' conversations that we've been having recently. I just saw Diana cringe when I said it's hot out of the oven. I liked it. You didn't cringe on his tango analogy. What's wrong with my hot out of the oven
I don't
analogy?
know. I don't know. Some things I like, some things I don't like. I really don't like that one.
It's got a
It's
gooey center to it. It's beautiful.
almost as bad as secret sauce.
Okay. All right. Which I also still like and still use frequently.
So the
So
worst thing would be the secret sauce is hot out of the oven. That's
okay. Well, we're going to tango around this topic of the secret sauce of grit. And how do you build grit into a team? Because one of the things we're hearing people talk about at conferences, Philip and I were just in Wisconsin. Shout out to our friends at the Healthcare Leaders Association in Wisconsin, where Philip and I both gave presentations and we got to hang out and we did an escape room with everybody. We love going to not only do we like going to the speak at the conferences, but we like participating in the conferences and talking with people because we hear what their real problems are. And one of the things that we heard some of them talk about is like, there's not enough grit in business. Like there's not enough, we're not seeing people that are going after problems and just staying on those problems long enough to solve them, that people tend to give up a little bit too quickly, or things get a little bit too hard, or whatever that is. That's not a totally new problem. I think that people have talked about that from the Generation Z's coming into the workforce, which actually as a generation actually have a pretty good work ethic, but they also are more prone to talk about issues like anxiety of like, well, that makes me tense, or I won't talk to that person. We did a podcast recently where we talked about like a employee who was struggling with another employee and who wouldn't talk to that employee. When they brought it to their manager, they wanted their manager to solve it. The manager's like, well, you're gonna have to talk to the person you're struggling with. And they were like, nope, I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm not doing that. That's definitely happening. But grit is something that especially in the United States, is something that's been slipping for a long time. You think about things like, I love history, and you think about like the stories. There's a book that a longtime relative of mine made of like settling in Texas on the frontier. And you read the things that they had to go through and what they did, and you're just like, it's unbelievable. Like the levels, you talk about first world problems. Like sometimes we're beyond that, like today our team was working, like we spent some time, Ashley was helping me because I couldn't like screencast to our new large television in our conference room. Like those are not the same problems that like settlers had. Settlers really had like Zeke just fell out of the wagon and broke his leg and we can't fix it because there's no doctors out here. Like that's a different level of problem. And it's advanced, as technology has advanced and as our standard of living has advanced and all those things, we've gotten a little bit softer in America. A good example was, I know, Diana, you're shaking your head no, but it's true. We've gotten a little bit softer. We have people complain about things. Like my friend texted me who's got a Tesla, and he's got a Tesla and it's it's got the self-driving feature on it. And he was texting me, he was complaining about the self-driving feature because he said that when a semi truck passes him, that if you're driving a car and big semi truck gets next to you, you tend to kind of slip over in your lane a little bit. Well, the Tesla doesn't. It didn't move over. And so it just feels like, oh no, I'm going to get hit by the semi truck. And then he said, well, they did an update and it fixed it. So now the car does actually move over a little bit when a bigger car is next to you, just to help you feel safer. But then as soon as that truck passes you, the Tesla immediately gets back in the center lane, which makes you jump a little bit. So he was complaining about that. And I texted back to him like, wow, I didn't know there was a level below first world problems like that. I'm sorry that you're sitting in your automated car. Like, go back in time to like Zeke's parents, and like Zeke just felt out and like, what problems are you dealing with in the future? I can't imagine what problems you're dealing with. And you're like, well, in my self-driving automobile that goes 70 miles an hour down the highway, sometimes it gets a little too close to the car next to me, and it makes me a little nervous. It's
Not
like,
only
oh,
that, but like, sorry, it gets too close to the giant logistical miracle of semi trucks bringing me my goods to Walmart and Target. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like,
Are they bringing that to the general store? No, to my
yeah,
garage.
that's right. Yeah.
My garage like later that day sometimes. Like, what do you need? Like, I need groceries. Like, oh, I want them now in my on my front porch in 25 minutes, and also pick me up some McDonald's on the way. And you can get that done today. So maybe we're getting a little bit soft as society. Malcolm Gladwell had a good example of it that's a little bit older from his book Outliers, where he asked the question, why do Asian students from Asian countries perform better at math than American students do? And it was asking that question. And that's something that's been documented for quite a while, that Asian students are better at math than American students are. So he was like, what creates that? So they looked at a variety of different factors. And what they found is that is it one group is smarter than the other? The answer is no. What they found was when they gave a problem to an American student or to an Asian student. Oh, by the way, education, is it better in Asia? The answer is no. The education is similar. What they found was it was a cultural issue. And it was when they put an American student up and an Asian student up on a board and they give them the same problem, they will track together in terms of trying to solve the problem, but the American student is much more likely to give up on the problem and not spend as much time on it, where the Asian student continues to work on the problem until they figure it out. And so that is like when I think of grit, I always think of that story of like just not giving up, taking another step, like figuring it out, like keeping your wits about you. I had a professor in college who used to always say when we were working on a complex chemical engineering problem or something, he would always say, everybody just relax. It's okay. Like, you don't have to know the answer. You don't have to see how to get there. Let's just explore this together. Like, I think we have a pressure, and I think we have a temperature, and I think we have a volume, and I think we know this, and I think we know this. And let's capture what we know so we can kind of work through the problem. So today we thought, since we're hearing people say that we're seeing this lack of grit in businesses, and since the word grit is also in fashion right now of saying we want grit in businesses because we want people that are gritty and can solve problems, how do you build a culture of grit? So how do we build that out? So you've already heard from all of us on the call. I'm Don, and we've heard Diana is already here, and we've heard Philip is already here. So we don't even have to do the introductions because you can tell our different voices. Because I'm Don. If it's not me and it's a male voice, it's Philip. And if it's Diana, then it's Diana.
Oh, I was
Right?
gonna joke and be like, "This is Philip," but okay.
I was gonna say, hi, I'm Diana.
Look, I'm sorry for stepping on your humor there.
All
Or
right.
attempted humor.
I'm just wearing
Like
black.
the grit, like it's a good example of grit. So like that wasn't funny at all, but you should keep trying. Like don't like just keep coming back.
So rude.
That is insane. You know, I was thinking grit is actually my mother-in-law's favorite word, and she reads books, anything that has to do with grit. Before grit was cool, Denise Burrell was all into grit. And she's someone, when you go biking, Denise has one speed, uphill and downhill. It is the same speed. When you go skiing, Denise has one speed, and it's impressive. She's learning cello as an adult, literally is playing music now after 12 years that people play in symphonies. She's literally a part of a symphony. It's awesome. So grit is the example, and when Denise talks about it, it's kind of to your point, Don. Like, I know the end in sight. I know what that goal is, or I know where I'm trying to go, and she will plow through however long it takes to get there, whether that's cello, a bike, or a ski trail. And it's pretty impressive. I think in business, what that looks like is similar. Like, we know where we're going, and that's why we talk so much about goals and objectives. If you know where the horizon is, Pioneer Zeke, broken leg or not, we're going to go there. We're going to get there one way or another. And there's no stopping. There's no settling, because that's what matters. And I think that's hard to build. That's hard for a lot of people, I think, to to reconcile with too, because you're like, well, maybe our goal is wrong. Maybe that's what Gen Z says a lot. Like, if it's that hard, is it worth it? Why don't we go another way?
Oh, that's a good one. I was just going to say, like, Zeke and you shall find is what I was going to say, which is an example of a funny joke. Diana, just to give that back to you, feedback back to you.
That wasn't funny at all. I didn't laugh even a little bit.
Yes, you did.
No,
That's a
I didn't.
lie. I can see you. And Diana has a look on her face when she thinks something's funny, but she doesn't want it to be funny. And she gave me that face. She thinks she's hiding it, but I
You
can
don't
tell.
know what you're talking about.
You're laughing on the inside. I can see that. So, Philip, you brought up something really good. So there's 2 points here that I want to attack that we kind of touched briefly on in this conversation. First of all, feedback, like giving feedback. If somebody is not being gritty, but they're stressed about something, like how do you talk to somebody about that? And then, Philip, I want to circle back to what you just said about like maybe it is too hard. Like maybe it doesn't have to be that hard because there's some generational differences there, especially but from boomers to Zs or to Gen Zs. Zoomers, as sometimes they're called, boomers to Zoomers. There's a big difference in what they value, and boomers tend to value hard work for the sake of hard work, not outcome. And Zoomers tend to value outcome, not for the sake of hard work. So let's go to the feedback thing first. Like, should you give feedback? If somebody's jokes aren't funny, Diana, do you want me to tell you? Or do you want me to coddle you and tell you you're hilarious?
I
What would you like,
mean,
Diana?
first
Help
of
me help
all,
you.
comedy is subjective, Don, and it's hard to give feedback on subjective topics.
I think people universally find Steve Martin funny. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay, well, I didn't ever claim to be Steve Martin. That's a lot of pressure. What are you doing?
This is a good example. So it's like if we're talking about like, are you feeling the pressure right now? Is it hurting you for me giving you that feedback, or am I challenging you and am I building grit? Is there a way I can give that feedback to you in a way that crushes your soul, or is there
Yeah.
a better way to give it to you in a way that makes you tougher, or is it better just to not give the feedback and just say you were so funny? What's better? What's the best way to do this?
I mean, I kind of think about how have you ever seen like the old American Idols where people go on and they're like super self-confident and they're like, I am the best singer ever. And then they sing and you're like, no, you're really, really not. But they think that they are, and they're like, the judges are crazy. I am a good singer. Those people never got appropriate feedback. Somebody there was always telling them, you're doing an amazing job. And while I think it builds confidence, I don't think it builds reality. And so I do appreciate the feedback, but I also do not believe that I will ever be Steve Martin. So maybe a little feedback with expectation setting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be Steve Martin.
Not with that attitude. You won't be Steve Martin.
I don't want to be Steve Martin. He's so awesome. I want him to be him. So yeah.
He is an institution for sure. The dude
Yeah.
is hilarious and
Yeah.
always has been. So, I mean, you brought up a couple good things. Is first of all, yeah, is it worth giving the feedback? I think the answer is yes. Otherwise, you get what we at People Centric call American Idol syndrome. Like we actually talk about that, where somebody's like, I am great at this because no one in my life has ever told me otherwise, even though I'm not. Is there value to tell somebody their baby's ugly, and what's the best way to tell them that?
You should definitely tell people. I tell people their babies are ugly all the time. I feel like people tell me that my baby is ugly all the time. So I'm okay with this, but there is a right way and a wrong way, and each person is different. I think that's the other part. Like I
Ooh, I
think
like
each
that.
person gets feedback differently and can handle feedback differently. And so you have to know your audience to give the feedback.
You know, the other piece of feedback with this gritty topic, I think sometimes it's when, and certainly there's those American Idol syndromes, but I think most of the anxiety probably comes not when people are like, I'm awesome, I can crush it, I can handle it. I think it's probably the opposite, at least me. If I have the most anxiety, it's not because I'm like, oh, I'm awesome, I'm going to do this thing. It's when I'm like, wow, I'm terrified and this is really brutal and hard, or I'm tired and sick of this, whatever this is, right? I think that's the human nature piece of it. And so I think feedback that we have a lot, whether it's leaders who are boomers all the way to Gen Z folk too, is like, no, you have choice. You have options. Like take a step back and look at what can we do? You know, I think that's why our message of influence is so powerful, because when people are spiraling in whatever their frustration or anxiety is, especially when I think they're starting to give up on that chalkboard math problem, it's like, no, you have influence. Like there is the space to figure this out. This is figure outable. That is really valuable feedback.
I like that concept that no feedback is feedback, right? If you don't hear anything, then you can think the worst. Like in our brains, we tend to do that, right? So if I'm not giving any feedback for something, then people tend to think, well, they think the worst. Oh, you must be thinking I'm doing a bad job, or you must think that really didn't go very well because you didn't tell me that.
You asked the question, how do you build grit? And I've been messing with that in my head since you asked it, and like, can you build it? And the thing that I keep coming back to is sort of that, Philip, that anxiety piece that you were talking about, and the like the concept that while I'm scared, I don't have a choice. I have to go do the thing. And I think when we have a choice, if we can give up, then we will, right? And but if you don't have the choice, you're like, I literally can't give up. Like Zeke the pioneer, dude couldn't give up or he died. So it was like, well, I have to keep going. And so I think sometimes removing the choice of giving up, like I'm going to pretend that that's not actually a choice and I have to get this thing done in this way and I have to move it forward. Like, I wonder if that helps build something. It's just that removal of that choice.
I've never thought of it like that, Diana, but I think you're absolutely right. If you think about it, like I really am interested in like some of the Eastern ways of thinking about things, Eastern philosophy. And I like one of my favorite concepts in Eastern philosophy is the idea of making friends with your pain or making friends with your anxiety. And I think in the case, like what strikes me when you say that, like you have no choice, like I have to solve this problem, so I'm just going to work through this. It's not saying, well, if I feel anxious, then I'm going to stop. It's that because I feel anxious, I have to solve this problem. I have to stay focused on it. Philip and I got to meet a practice administrator for an orthopedic practice who's a former like Marine Special Forces guy. And he was really interesting when we talked about it. I said, man, the pain that you all have to endure and just have to kind of work past and figure out how to like to ignore and all that stuff. And he goes, no, 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 no. That's not how you do it. Like it's the ability to feel the pain, acknowledge it, but then still think through it, to not panic, just to continue to work through whatever the problem is in front of you, knowing that that pain is a motivator to solve the problem. Because if you can solve the problem, then the pain goes away. He used the example like they do things where like they'll tie people up and throw you in the water. Well, you're drowning until you get out of that. And they're watching people who, if you panic means you let the anxiety overflow you and you can no longer solve the problem, then you can't escape from the thing. If you can, but if you can acknowledge that anxiety and focus more on the problem itself and solving the problem, then the anxiety becomes a powerful tool for you. The pain becomes a powerful tool. That's good. I like that.
I like that too. I was talking to a friend the other day who was working through a challenging situation. And I said, well, if it was me, I would just go do this thing. And she said, Diana, you have no fear. Like you just head on things. And I was like, Diana has no fear. Diana is literally diagnosed with generalized anxiety. Diana lives her life in fear. And so I was like, no, no, no. It's not that I don't have the fear. It's that I know that in that discomfort, there's something that I need to go after, right? I'm not going to grow if I'm not taking that on. If I let the anxiety take over and I just don't move something forward, then the anxiety wins. And I'm not going to live my life in this like weird, letting the anxiety control everything space.
So if you're coaching somebody, if you're working with somebody, so let's say I've got an employee on the team who's struggling with that anxiety piece and they're using the anxieties overcoming them. What I think we're saying, and you guys jump in here, is that we're saying acknowledge the situation, still acknowledge like we have to perform this, we have to do this, acknowledge the anxiety is there and just say it's there. But how do you coach somebody to get over the anxiety, to keep pushing through that? How do you get past that?
I think it's as much coaching yourself. And if you can coach yourself in this, then you're probably better at coaching other people in this too. And maybe it's almost always easier to Diana's point, if the friend is like, what? I thought you're I thought you're always like the ninja, that you always fix things. And it's like, no, sometimes it's easier to look at other people's situations and lean into it. But I think one coaching that a lot of us will share too is just that perspective piece, like, have you done this before? Think back. When was the last time you had a crazy problem with no solution? Surely that's happened before. And people are like, oh yeah. And they'll tell several stories. I was on a call yesterday where someone was sharing this exact same thing. I was like, you got to where you are because you went through the exact same thing your team member is going through. Have you shared that with them? And they're like, no, I have not. I am perfect. I do not share my mistakes. I was like, well, maybe we can. Maybe we can lean into that. Does your team member probably has seen that? And so like, how does that develop? What can that look like? And then I think looking forward, like the there is always hope. What is that? What is the end of this? This won't last forever, especially if we start trying to solve some problems.
Yeah. I since I live with generalized anxiety, I constantly spiral about things and I always play it out to the very worst, right? And I think thinking through all of the steps to get to the very worst possible outcome does somehow motivate me to be like, okay, well, it's never gonna be that, right? That's 35 steps to the very end, to the most horrible outcome ever. If I just take these 3 steps, it'll probably go away. And I just have to play it all the way out. I have to think through what's the worst, most terrible thing that could happen in this situation, and then recognize the like, well, that's 35 steps down the road, and it's probably not going to get there. I think I can take 2 steps and solve it and be done.
I love that example. Before our HLA trip, Don got a text from me the night before. We came home in the Herzog household. Murphy's Law hit. For us, it's only ever happened in threes. It was like 7 significant things that had happened. And I came home late after a thing. We were going to leave. I was going to do laundry, and our house smelled like sewage. Zeke, maybe he'd never smelled anything this bad because he had open air resources. Like, it was terrible. We have an old house. It's almost 100 years old. And my wife was going to go on a different trip for days. All the things where I imagined our house bursting into flames, either because some weird thing would happen while I was gone because of this weird sewage situation, or I would just light it on fire and solve all my problems. But what I really appreciate in that, yeah, I did a lot of problem solving before I even reached out to Don, just to say, hey, heads up, this is a thing that's happening. He was super quick to call and say, hey, like, do you need anything? And I'm like, no, I'll just smell like poop in the morning because I'm going to sleep in my house. No, we figured it out. But one thing I think that does help with this too is like being able to reach out to people if you're hitting that point, like talk yourself through it. What's the worst case scenario? But then having that help and support around you as well. And just the small thing Don did of like, you can stay here. It was adding just another option. We had a list of friends who could help. And I was like, even if our house smelled terrible, worst case scenario for a whole week, that would be terrible. But we could come back, we could figure it out. There's a community of support around us too. And I think in the workplace, there's a lot of things that happen also. You don't have to hold that plate and that pressure just you.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that, Philip, because it was good. I'll tell you something, to be honest, like when you called, there was a little bit of an instinct of me of saying like, oh, you're dealing with all this stuff. Don't worry, cancel it. You don't have to go. We'll figure it out. Like I can do the presentations. There was a little bit of me that was like, well, that might be the solution on this. But I was stopping and thinking of saying like, I knew that there were ways to get around those problems. Like I knew that there was ways to get past that stuff. And I knew that you had it under control. I also know what it's like to feel out of control of those situations. So there was just a moment of saying like, okay, we'll solve this. There's lots of solutions. You don't have to sleep in that house tonight. You can come over here if you don't want to, and you guys can crash on the couch or whatever. Like there's ways to get through this. But I also was careful not to give you an out on the trip itself. Like you keep working the problems and we'll solve it. We have a lot of resources. I said, we've got people here that are still in town that would help you if you need to let somebody into your house. Like we could do all these different things. So there's a temptation, I think sometimes from leaders to, I don't want to say coddle, because you weren't asking for coddling. You never leaned into it and said, I don't think I can go on this trip. You never said that. You just were like letting me know that you were struggling. And I think just as a human, then I said, well, okay, I see you struggling. And if there's ways I can help you struggling without totally bailing you out, you still have responsibilities. I think managers can keep that focus. It's a balance of the two things.
Which is great. Yeah, it wasn't an either or, and I was looking forward to going on the trip. So yeah, I also was not trying to get out. But it worked. It was one of those things where like we can just admit that this is happening, and I'll be out of contact until I meet you at the airport. But here's the thing. Here's the situation, and I think that led to some of the support as well. So yeah,
I think managers get stuck in a sucker's choice there, where they feel like the choice, and we've talked about sucker's choice before. That's from the book Crucial Conversations. It's a psychology term, believe it or not. It's the idea that we tend to think we're between a rock and a hard place. And so the manager, sometimes the natural reaction would be either to say, oh, Philip, let me completely solve this problem for you. And here's what we're going to do is you don't have to go on the trip. You don't go on, I'll go on the trip. I'll take the bullet and all those things. And then what happens is then when I'm on the trip and I'm doing all of the presentations and I'm all in the stuck, there's a little piece of me that's going like, damn it. Like, I got things at home too. I got problems too. Why can't I deal? Why am I dealing with your stuff? And over time, you start to resent people for that. Like I've seen people have that pattern. Like, I do everything for my people, but they don't do anything for me. And then somebody brings a problem and we'll see them go, no, don't worry about it. I'd love to handle that for you. And we see them go that direction. Or they go hard the other direction and say like, well, suck it up. I don't care. Phil, are you calling me? Are you trying to tell me you're not going on this trip? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Because I don't care. You're going on this trip. You are not getting out of this thing. And that's hard the other direction, right? It's like the suck it up approach, the suck it up answer versus the, oh, let me bail you completely out. Those are two very extreme sides to a spectrum. And when the real answer might be, hey, let's troubleshoot this together. I'm with you. I'm walking through this. But you still, at the end of the day, you are still going to have to solve these problems. It's still on your plate to figure this out.
And I think when managers or people themselves give that out or give the easy way, then the next time that happens, the next time there's stuff going on in your life and you have to take a trip, then you're kind of like, oh, Don gave me an out last time, I'll take an out this time, right? And again, Philip, you were not doing this. That's not what you were doing. But I think it builds those habits in people. Whereas if you do what you did and said, well, we'll work through it together, then next time they're like, okay, I can work through this, right? Or I'm going to call Don, have him help me work through this. Or, if I am afraid of having a difficult conversation, if I have one, then the next time I have to do it, it's a little less scary. It's a little less hard to do. And so you're building that resilience, you're building that grit, you're building that habit into your life of just like not turning away from the things.
I think that's what I love. One of the things I love about our team is just that when weird stuff happens, hard stuff happens, I think the message usually is like we stop, we engage, we listen, and then it's, hey, you're capable, we're capable. Like we're able, you're able. Like there is a way. There is a way through this. We can work, we can do this together. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I like, Philip, your earlier point too, which I want to address a little bit, is if you have a mind. So we talk about not presuming intent. So it's a common thing that we do as humans, and it's a protective measure. It's actually a valuable way to think. Well, what you're doing is you're anticipating what the other person's thinking, which helps us to know how to approach the other person. So like sometimes we talk about meeting people where they are. Like being situationally aware is really good in terms of meeting somebody where they are. But if you lock into that, what the other person is thinking and you tell them what they're thinking, that really breaks down communication. So if I think that you don't have grit and I know that you don't have grit, and then you come to me with, hey, I've got an easier way of doing something, I'm very likely to respond by saying, well, you're just being lazy. Just do it. Like, suck it up. I know you're just trying to get out of some work. And I've heard managers say things like that. And it's a double mistake. It's a double mistake. It's a mistake, number one, because you're presuming intent with somebody, which is a great way to shut down conversation. If I'm talking to you about something and I tell you that you're just lazy or you just don't care or something when you really do care, that is a frontal attack on our personalities, and we don't respond well to that as humans. But the second thing is we might be missing a process improvement. And let me talk to the boomers out there for a second. First of all, good job finding the podcast and figuring out how to play it on your device. That was a good job doing that. Yes, I'm picking on you and I'm laughing at you, and I'm almost with you on that. Like, I don't know what platform. I always talk like you can listen to it on whatever platform you want. And I think Gen Zs laugh at me when I say things like that because they're like, yeah, it's just a podcast, dude. Just click on it and listen to it. What's the problem? But good job finding the podcast. But here's the thing. Boomers as a generation like value hard work. You're the ones that you hang out like in the break room with each other, like giving each other high fives over how much vacation time you still have saved up. Gen Z, Zoomers are in the break room talking about what they did on their last vacation. If I take a step back as a generation and say which one is a better perspective, you should be taking the vacation. You were wrong about that. Hard work is the value. I like it in terms of the grit side. Like, hey, if you're Zeke and you broke your leg and you got to get back in that wagon and figure out how to get there, like there's no other choice. As Diana said, you got to do that hard work thing. What I think boomers have done is sometimes boomers will jump out of the wagon and lay underneath the wagon to break their own leg because they value the hard work. Like they want to show like, look how awesome I am because I worked so hard on this. And I think that in younger generations of people, and I'll put myself, I think Gen Xers were the first ones also to discover this, of saying there might be an easier way of doing this. Maybe we don't have to do it that way. So be careful, I think, as you're listening to somebody bringing up thing, could we do this a better way? Is there an easier way of doing this? Be careful that there isn't actually a better way of doing it and that you're listening to that. What would you guys add to that? Have you seen that with clients in terms of conversations, or do Gen Zs have better ways of doing things sometimes?
I think there is that if it ain't broken, don't fix it mentality. But then to your point, you're like, well, maybe you're a boomer, but your wagon wheels fell off a long time ago and you just have a bunch of boomers who were carrying the wagon because your wheel was broken. Maybe there is another way. And what I love, I think there's a lot of boomers that I really am friends with. I go to a church with a lot of boomers. and they're friends. We're good buddies. And they all say the same thing, right? When you come to move a box or you do some volunteering together, work smarter, not harder. And I think a lot of them maybe learn that at the tail end of life. So you're like, I will take that. Let's apply that then to the workforce now. And I think a lot of people do at the end, especially if they have space after retirement. We had a leader that recently transitioned at the end of last year. And in some ways, I think we saw them step back and say, I'm really proud of a lot of the hard work I did, but I wonder if I was impactful or as influential in spreading like more growth and more feedback to the people around me. Like, I wonder if the leaders around me could have gamed up a little bit better if I'd have been a different leader to them. And that is a difference.
That's a great point as you think about this. If you're a Zoomer and you have a Boomer boss, we've talked about like how do you lead your boss? If you think about how you influence them, again, if you go in presuming intent of just saying, well, you value just this work and you only do things the old way and you don't change your mind about anything, like you're going to shut down that conversation. Where if you offer maybe some of the solutions, but you kind of set it on the table and see if the other person picks it up, then maybe they will, maybe they'll pick it up. I was thinking about my mom travels. She takes these bus trips that I affectionately call these old lady bus trips because I love her. She's great. But she does these bus trips and they're typically people that are older that like those trips. But she took one where they had to go fly someplace before the bus trip. So it was a flight to the place and then they were going to do a bus trip. And she hadn't flown in a long time. And she was describing to me like the pains of plane travel. But before she left, she called me and she was like, what do I need to know about how airports work? And I said, the first tip I would give you is you should download the app of the airline that you're flying with. That's the number one tip I would give you because if you can track your reservation, you have your ticket on there, you don't have to go check, you don't have to wait in line, you don't have to check in, you can just the only line you'll have is security. You don't have to even wait by the gate. It will give you updates right to your phone and all that kind of stuff. And she says, "Well, I'm old school and I like to go talk to the gate agent." And I said, "Okay, like that's totally fine if you're okay doing that." So she went on the trip. There were some cancellations, some changes and everything. And she called me back later and she was just like, "Oh my gosh." She says, "The worst thing about that whole thing is like we were delayed for just a couple hours, but I had to really hold by the gate and then they get on there and they make announcements and you can't hear anything and like it's super crowded around the gate and you don't know what's going on and da 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 da." And I just said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, how do you handle that situation?" And I said, "Well, I'm at the bar having a drink and a hamburger watching my app when that happens because the app is actually updated faster than the gate agents even have a lot of times the information that they have." And she said, "Okay, well, next time I travel, maybe I'll have you help me to download that app." Like that's a good point. So sometimes you still have to meet people where they are. Is what I'm trying to say. Is like as you're promoting better ways of doing things. She still hasn't flown since she got that advice. So we'll see if she does that next time. She's still anxious about flying now because of that experience and getting stuck in places and things. But I like the advice we've given. So how would you sum up for people listening? What have we learned about building grit into a culture?
I think that it starts with the individual, right? Like I as a leader or I as a coworker can help you work through some of the things and support you and coach you, whatever that looks like. But you have to be willing to face your own fear and give yourself some own self-confidence and remove the mindset that you're just going to give up. You have to start. It has to start with you because I don't think you can build grit without wanting to build some grit.
And those relationships, I like that point too. That's why one of the biggest things we tell managers is build relationships with your employees. That doesn't mean you have to go bowling every Friday or whatever that is, but it does mean you need to get to know your people. When you onboard people, get to know them, spend some time with them, ask them how they're doing on a regular basis, give feedback. Because if you have to go to them and tell them their baby's ugly, that's not the first conversation you want to have with somebody. You got to get to know them. Philip, what's your closing thoughts here on how to build grit inside culture?
I was thinking it's funny, the American Idol piece where you wonder, like, so maybe some of those people were told 1,000 times, "You're terrible. Stop that. Don't ever do it again." They're like, "I'm going to show you. I'm going to become world famous." And they became world infamous on a show that, we don't remember the name. We just remember how terrible they were. Grit, is probably, we're all in progress with grit. I really hate that word sometimes because it's a weird word. I feel like I feel sand in my teeth when I say grit. Like I was at the beach and my face fell in the sand and it's saltwatery and gritty, like, oh, gross. I think it's slow going and the patience and Diana, what you said has really stuck with me a lot. Being able to step back enough, you think through all those problems maybe and your steps to solve them. And then like, okay, I'm going to go do this now. And I think your ability to just define for yourself, what are you going to do? Okay, here's the problem. Here's the situation. what are you going to do next? I was reading this book, an autobiography of Sam Walton, and one of the things Sam Walton said early on, he said problems are just opportunities in work clothes. And I think there's a lot of things Sam Walton and I did that maybe I would not totally agree with, but problems are opportunities in work clothes. So even when your house smells like sewage, that was on my mind, this little quote, and I thought that is actually very true. That's a really good perspective, opportunity in work clothes. So how you deal with that then defines how much of an opportunity it can be.
I also
Yeah.
kind of want to add, like, if you don't go after some of those opportunities, you don't build cool things, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's good.
you don't get there. If I had on my first day been like, I don't really want to do that, or that seems hard, right? At People Centric, we wouldn't have this now, you know? And I think
Mm.
you have to think about what's worth it for you and what are you trying to get to.
Yeah. And then not try to solve, keep pushing problems down to your people. Let your people solve those problems.
Mm.
Diana hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I'm sure I was shocked that you stayed your first week at People Centric. Like we had nothing. It was like, I mean, you came in thinking like I'm going to run into this really well established, but I don't know if you thought it was well established, but I don't think you knew how unestablished we were.
I did feel a little blindsided by the by the circumstance. Yes.
You were like, what's our phone number? And we started laughing. Like we don't have a phone. We didn't have filing cabinets. We had like nothing. You kept asking these questions like, yeah, we should have that. That does seem like things a real business would have. And we didn't have any of those things. The good news is it wasn't like what I'm kind of patting myself on the back for was we didn't say, well, crap, let me go get a phone then for you so you have a phone to run. Oh, let me go get a filing cabinet for you to go get that. It was, yeah, you're free to go get those things and go solve those problems. And because you do have grit, you brought grit in. We didn't build that in you. You brought it in with you. You just said, I'm going to start solving problems. And we just started having stuff we'd never had before, like
I
a
think
phone.
that one of the best things you thought I did was fix those desks. Do you remember this story?
A little bit. Tell the story.
Okay.
Yeah, tell it.
Okay, so there was a pile of desks half made in like the corner of the office, and I was like, what is going on with these like half built desks? And you were like, oh, the manufacturer didn't send us these parts. And I was like, oh, okay. And you were like, we just haven't, I don't know what to do with that. We haven't figured it out. And I was like, okay. So I called the manufacturer. It was going to take like 6 weeks or something. And I don't know. They kind of were, it was going to cost $37 for a new part kit or so. I don't remember. It was something crazy. And so I was like, okay, what are my next options? Because I don't like those options. I said yes. And I don't think I ever paid for it, but I said yes, like, sure, send me things. And my next option was like, I was like, where'd you get these? Who did you buy these from? And so I went to the place that we bought them from, and they had a few on display. And I literally brought my screwdriver and my Allen wrench and removed the parts from the display and took them back with me. And Don thought that that was the most amazing thing that had ever happened to him. He was, I got the most praise from Don I've ever gotten about those desks.
I forgot about that, but you've done that 1,000 times since then. Like those kinds of things, I've just seen you do it so many times. And that's too bad that you got the most praise from me ever for that, because I have seen you do that so many, many, many times after that. I probably take that for granted and I shouldn't.
I think it was just shocking the first time. And you were like, what?
It's
Why?
just so badass to go to this. Like you think about no barriers. Like that's what you're trying to build. That's the opportunities. This is why we say like give feedback to your people. This is why we say get to know your people individually. This is why we say have the hard conversations, because you can foster that in people and build that kind of responsibility in people. We were lucky to find Diana came in with that. Like some people do show up with that. Some people have figured that out. If your people don't have that, though, you can foster it and build it. And people will bring a tool into a whatever it was, whatever the store was. And
Office Depot.
was it Office Depot? I thought it was Office Depot, and I was like, I shouldn't say their name if it wasn't. But yeah, heads up, Office Depot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were the ones that did that. So come after us. We're the ones that you sold it to us. You made us pay for it in the first place, then you didn't provide it. So, and then
I don't think their people cared. I think their people were also a little shocked that I was like, I'm just gonna take these screws.
because
What?
we need this.
Who is this crazy lady coming in
So
here?
basically what we're saying, Diana is Zeke of the 21st century.
Yeah, yeah.
Pioneering. There you
Pioneering.
go.
Yeah. So as you find yourself on the journey to the west coast of your dreams, please make sure you bring your Zeke along with you so that you can overcome the obstacles that are in front of you
There you go.
and
Just overcome.
keep
Build the
Zeking your
desk.
treasure. Build your desk. So thanks for joining us on our tango of the People Centric Podcast, and we can't wait to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead